My name is Fathia Absie. I am from Somalia, but America has been my home for the past 24 years. And, I truly feel blessed that God has chosen this wonderful nation for me, that I ended up here of all the places I could have been as a Somali diaspora. I'm here in Portland. My film Broken Dreams, documentary film, my first film, is part of the Cascade Festival of African Films. And I am very delighted to be here and very, very excited. I knew very early when I was, I guess as early as like 7, 8 years old, I knew I wanted to be a storyteller. I didn't know what that meant exactly, whether to be, just telling stories or writing stories or being a documentary filmmaker. But I knew I wanted to tell stories. I don't know, there was something about the culture, my culture, that people just didn't really treat each other very, very well. It's a very tribal-based culture. And wrong or right, you always take side and stand with your clan, and that was very, very hard for me to comprehend as a child. And I just did not like the way we treated each other and the way everything had to be sort of like, people sort of seemed to me that they were living in denial. People didn't really didn't seem to be very forthcoming in things, and everything had to be kind of swept under the carpet, and no conversations or open dialogue. And I wanted to do something about that, because I don't know, there was something about me that just very early loved people and humanity, and just didn't really differentiate people, whether it's culture or religious or clan-based. And so I just thought, oh my God, if we talk to one another, and listen to one another and get to know one another, nothing else would matter. And I wanted to bring that forward. And so I knew the only place that I wanted to come in order for me to make that a reality was the United States. And it was an uphill battle, but it did come true in 1988. I came to the United States as a runaway teenager in my early teens, and I've been here ever since. The reason I chose this documentary to be my first film, it kind of chose me. I knew I wanted to. I was working for Voice of America at the time when this whole story of the Somali youth going back to Somalia came to light. And it really touched me in a very personal way. And I said to myself, oh my God, this is very, very important. I remember doing interviews, calling Minnesota all the time and talking to relatives of the boys and friends and people who knew them. And, it seemed like people were afraid to say anything. And I thought, well, this would be a great time for me to start, documenting this. I wasn't even ready because, there's a lot of preparation that you have to do. I didn't know how to operate camera. I didn't really have any money. But I said, oh my God, this is a good time to kind of throw yourself in front of the train and just keep moving. And so I came to Minneapolis, and I was able to talk to, some relatives of the boys who died, and they kind of really, took me under their wing and said, because we know who you are from Voice of America, and we remember, that I've always interviewed, every time I interviewed members of Al-Shabaab, it was always a battle between them and I, and people really appreciated that. They somehow saw me, Somali people saw me as someone who didn't have a race in the horse of what's going on in Somalia, and someone who really cared about what was happening and wanted to make a difference. and be a voice for them. And so that had led me the opportunity to be able to giving this wonderful chance to be able to interview this relatives and well-respected members of the community. And it's a very rare glimpse, you know, but I am very, very happy that, you know, that they allowed me and have given me that opportunity, you know, to tell their story from a Somali perspective is very, very important to them and to me as well. The reason why it's so important that Africans tell their stories is, you know, all you hear about Africa is just tragedies and death and destruction and, you know, just horrible scenes and horrible things. And I think for someone who is not African, you know, the only thing that they can see is the ugliness and the tragedies and the things that they're not used to. And we have seen a lot of tragedies, and but the bottom line is, our lives are not full of misery and tragedies. There are many wonderful things that are happening in Africa. Africa is just not a sad continent. There's much more to it. And once you talk about the positive and the beautiful things, how rich it is, it would give, I think, Africans, and especially young Africans, the self-esteem, you know, to something to be proud of, you know, that you know, it's very important that Africans do this, and for a change, you know, telling a story from a well-rounded story is very important, but not just death and destruction. And I think only Africans can do that because it's their stories. Cascade Festival of African Films brings films that are engaging, colorful, thought-provoking, and everything just brilliant, all the brilliance that only Africa has to offer. It's just magical.